I think it's safe to say that we've all been there. We get in a disagreement with a friend, and then all of a sudden we're thinking, oh my gosh, is the friendship gonna end over this? So in this episode, we're talking about how to disagree with friends without losing the friendship. Let's go. Welcome back to Accidentally Intentional, where we are on a mission to break through surface level connection to build deep, meaningful friendships. And disagreements are obviously the worst. So this is actually part 2 of a dialogue we've been having about disagreements. The last video you can check up here. You can watch it before or after. Either one works. We're talking about really the mindset shifts that are necessary in order to maintain our friendships with this level of division that's currently happening. So in this video, we're talking about the actual practical steps that you can take. I think it's safe to say that most of us don't actually want conflict. It would be much more comfortable to never have conflict or disagreements in our life, because one of two things usually happens. People will either go silent or perhaps go scorched earth. And I have definitely been guilty of doing both of those before. So this is a continuing learning process for me too. And I just wanted to say that up front because I'm not better than anyone else. And I want to continue getting better at it and continue growing. And I think that's why you're watching or listening to this episode too. So there's 5 points we're going to discuss in order to be able to disagree in a friendship without losing your mind or losing the friendship in the process. And the first point I want to make is focus on the person and not the position. Carlos Whitaker is a fun follow on Instagram, and he says, stand with people, don't stand on issues. And I love that, contrast, because it really gets to the heart of this whole concept. We all need to remember that your friend in the relationships in your life, they are more than their political stance, their post, or their comments. And when we make sweeping generalizations like, oh, anyone who thinks this is no friend of mine, or anyone who voted for this person is, I'm not talking to you anymore, it can get super visceral, and that's also wrong, okay? Anytime we are feeling that desire to just completely cut somebody out entirely because we've seen something without the nuance and the full context and a full conversation with them, that's not fair to anybody. And let's be honest, we won't want to be the recipients of that kind of treatment either. So it's important to focus on the person and not their position. And also, disagreement doesn't erase the history or the bond that you share. You can disagree with your friends, and the friendship doesn't need to die in the process, because the values and the memories and, the relationships that you have built and grown is on a weak foundation if it can be undercut by something so simply as a different way of looking at life, or a different thought process, or a different opinion, or a small disagreement. And you might even be thinking right now, oh, it's not a small disagreement, it's a big one. I think if we take a step back, we have to think through how much are the friendships and the relationships worth in our lives. Because if all the research and data points to the number one predictor of living the longest and happiest life possible is the quality of your relationships, then I think disagreements kind of don't equal out in scale. And here's something that I've found helpful whenever I know that I'm about to now enter a conversation with someone where we are disagreeing about something. And this happens with a lot of my friends. I don't have friends across the board that all think the same thing. I used to, but then I realized I don't want to create an echo chamber. So I've been working on diversifying the trains of thought with the people that I have in my life. And so what I remind myself when I know that we're going to disagree on something is I think about why I value the person, and remember that why I value them has nothing to do with this disagreement. I value them regardless of how different we think about a certain situation. Okay, point number 2. And let me tell you, my ADHD makes me not the best at it, because this point is listen longer than you talk. Now, maybe you're like, girl, what does ADHD have to do with it? Because I think I'm going to forget what I'm about to say. And so I have this tendency, it's a really bad habit, to cut people off in the middle of them talking. Meanwhile, if I had just been quiet for a couple minutes longer, they would have answered the question or spoken to the thought that I wanted to hear about later. So that's something I am definitely continuing to actively work on, is listening longer than you actually talk, because that gives room for people to truly share their thoughts and opinions. There is a really interesting stat that it takes the brain an average of 200 milliseconds to form a thought. But here's the craziness. On average, it takes us 90 milliseconds to respond to a thought. So 200 is what it takes to create the thought, but we're responding already at 90, which means we're literally talking without thinking. So point 2 speaks to that and helps settle the temperature down as people get to be thoughtful in their dialogue, and you, in turn, get to show a posture of curiosity. And I've done a ton of episodes on body language cues that help you when you're in conversation, as well as good questions to ask. So feel free to look through the channel for all of that info, because I don't want to focus on that right here in this one. Question for you. Are you an introvert who's tired of surface level connection? See, being quiet or reserved isn't the problem. The real cost of wanting connection but fearing the risk is regret. It's lying awake, replaying the conversations that you didn't have. It's watching other people form deep friendships while you feel like you're always on the outside. And maybe you've even started wondering, is this even worth it anymore? See, I get it, because I'm an introvert too. And I'm proof that you can build deep, meaningful friendships even if you're shy, even if you're not the life of the party, and even if starting conversations feels impossible because of social anxiety. See, I've been friendship coaching people privately on this for years, and I've spoken to audiences across the country about connection. And now, for the very first time, I'm inviting you, my podcast listeners, to my Beyond Small Talk cohort. It's a 6-week small group program designed exclusively for introverts. You'll get one-on-one coaching sessions with me, plus small group coaching alongside people who actually get it and get you. This is actually where you find your people, and at the end of this, I promise you're going to walk away with the tools and confidence to finally move past small talk, break through it, and build the deep friendships that you've been craving. Here's the deal though. I am keeping this first cohort intentionally small, and the wait list is the only way in. So if this feels like it's for you, click the link in the description or show notes below and claim your spot. Back to the show. But it is important to ask questions and really draw out someone's thought process before we offer our counterpoints. I think that in any relational dynamic, things blow up when both sides want to be heard, but no one wants to actually hear. So this is what this whole idea of listening longer than you talk is speaking to, because you're proving to someone just through your actions that you truly do want to hear what they have to say. And on this thought process of anger, because I think that whenever things blow up, usually anger is the emotion that's tied to it. And I heard somewhere recently, and I really like this, that anger happens as a result of a injustice that we feel. Maybe it feels like something is unfair, something doesn't make sense. Why did it happen? It wasn't deserved, etc. The undertone of most of our anger is because of a sense of injustice. So if we understand that, then we know that if someone is upset, just asking them questions help us understand where that sense of injustice that they're feeling is actually stemming from, so that we can calm the temperature down. Here's an example of a sentence that can be really beneficial when you're feeling a conversation go south into a disagreement zone. You could say, help me understand why this matters to you. Or even better, start the question with what or how. How did you come to that conclusion in your thought process? Tell me about the thought process that went into that. Something like that. Which then leads me into point 3, which is the fact that tone and body language matter more than your words. Because when it comes to communication, it's broken down into the 3 parts. Words that you say are only 7% of communication. Your tone is 38%. And your body language is the remaining 55%. So this is why I say, if you feel like there's any disagreement happening via written, word, text, email, Instagram, social media of any kind, you have to stop it right there and say, let's let's have a conversation about this. Pick up the phone, even better FaceTime because you could see, your body language, or of course, meet in person. That is the ultimate goal. Don't let conversations happen without being able to truly make them a priority and truly hearing the person out. Because again, it's kind of ironic that we write people off most often, literally via writing in text messages. And we don't want that to happen to us. So we need to go first and be the friends that embody that type of grace and curiosity and desire to really understand why someone is thinking the way that they are about something. And I would say that disagreeing with nice words still comes across harshly. So if someone just shares their thought process with you, immediately responding with, I disagree, isn't going to really go well. I think you can ask way more questions about it and then say, here's my perspective on it, and have a dialogue that way. But we have to really be careful about the words we're choosing and of course our tone and our body language too. And I would recommend anyone read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It is an incredible book when it comes to negotiation, but also just a fantastic book for how to grow in your communication skills. One of the tips that he talks about when things are escalating is tune into your FM DJ voice. So it's the really low, slow voice where you are remaining in complete control. It almost has this sound of empathy behind this. Tell me more about that. I am so interested to hear what it is that helped you come to that conclusion. Totally different feel than, really? Okay. Well, tell me why. Nobody's going to respond well to that. I've learned that the hard way. Okay, point 4 is don't make every hill a battlefield. Not every disagreement is worth a fight. Truly. It is not. And we get so lost in the moment where we really put long-term friendships on the line. I just saw someone commented on a recent video that they lost a friendship of 35 years over a small disagreement, over one very specific thing. And that's heartbreaking because it means that the foundation really wasn't about the person that you've come to know and value and cherish. It was about their thoughts and whether you wanted them in your life or not. So a good way to gauge it is asking yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Or is this just me wanting to be right? Better yet, a better question to ask yourself when you're feeling it come up, do I want to be right or do I want to be reconciled? Because typically it can't be both. Reconciliation requires a lot of humility. And I know this is about disagreements and not about conflict resolution, but I just think that's a really important frame to point out. Friendship survives when we choose connection over winning. Winning is so stupid. It gets us literally nowhere. It doesn't push any relationships forward. It only puffs up our egos, okay? It only makes us more prideful. And to be honest, we don't need more pride. I think a lot of us need a lot more humility in our lives. Point 5, when you feel like you are starting to get very emotional, that this disagreement is starting to take a turn, a really helpful reframe is by using a sentence like this. Okay, so based on what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you just said makes me feel like insert. Or better yet, based on what you just said, the story that I'm telling myself is that you think about me. Is that true? If you give people the opportunity to clarify, everything tones down immediately. The temperature goes down, the room softens, and it becomes a more winsome conversation for both parties. Therefore, it creates clarity instead of defensiveness and divisiveness, which is ultimately what we want. And then point 6, you can always redefine a friendship. I did a video a couple weeks ago on how to figure out if the friendship is done or if it's just different, which you can check up there. But what I want to say right here on this part is that people's opinions can change at any point. I mean, we should give ourselves permission to change and grow and evolve. And yes, friendships usually shift when one person chooses to grow in one direction and the other person either stays the same or chooses to grow in a different direction. But that doesn't mean the friendships actually need to end. They could just look different. There could be zones where you're like, okay, we do not disagree on that. That's okay. I still care about and love you. So that's not a huge issue for me. We just know we don't need to necessarily discuss that anymore. We know where the other party stands. What you can instead do is still speak to the strengths of the friendship and use it as an opportunity to grow deeper. And as a reminder, if you haven't watched the other video from this 2-part series, I would encourage you to listen to that, because that is all about the mindset that we truly need to have in order to build friendships that withstand the incredible division that's happening in our world today. Know that I believe that you are worth building those incredibly rich, meaningful friendships. And what a gift that we have the opportunity for it to start with us today. I believe in you. I'll catch you